It's time to start Transmedia. Woo! So I'm your friendly neighborhood moderator. My name is Kat Trader, and the earlier panel didn't really make a whole lot of difference to give you my credentials, but this one it makes a little more sense. I actually have a master's in digital media from the UW, and I am a crazy transmedia psychotic, so I was kind of the natural choice to moderate this panel. And with that, I'm going to give it to you guys, and you can introduce yourselves and say why you're here in this panel.
Cool.
Go.
Okay. My name is Forrest Gibson. I'm here because I produced a web series. I have YouTube channels that have millions of views. I work with the Cheeseburger Network on a web series of theirs, and that's probably mostly it.
Excellent. David.
Hi, my name is David Ayala. I'm an iPhone and iPad developer, currently working on a feature documentary called Anonymous Artists of America. I guess I'm here to just share whatever it is.
I should have turned that on. I'm Matt Vansel. I'm creator of a web series and a series of feature films that are released both over the internet as well as traditionally. We recently broke the Kickstarter's record for raising funds for a video or film project and held the title for 36 hours.
Okay, now I have to ask, who took over?
Charlie Kaufman on a project called Anomalisa.
Now we know.
Yeah.
See? Short-lived
It was the puppets.
moment of fame.
More puppets.
Alrighty, so our overarching topic didn't have any clear front runners of what we wanted to talk about. We've got, I think, 5 different things as opposed to 3. So we're gonna mix and match and blend and take questions, and life will be grand. Does anybody want to start with questions? In the back.
How can you take like a traditional short film or any project and start thinking about it in a transmedia way? Because I feel like it really is an evolution of thought about the presentation of any given artwork. And how can you start doing that when you're used to working, you know, traditionally as a filmmaker, as a novelist, or whatever?
There's a lot of different ways to approach it, and I think thinking holistically, so understanding from the very beginning, and I'd say this applies to film in general, but I think especially when you're writing a screenplay or you're writing something for a traditional film format, you think of the story first, and you obviously need to think of the story, but you need to think about obviously who's your audience. And when I work on projects, I think is not only who's my audience, but who specifically are trend makers who might like what I'm making. So when I made the We're Nasty We Know video, we go, cool, our goal is to get Neil deGrasse Tyson to tweet this video. It's understanding who you're trying to reach and who do you want to like this. So making the work not only for yourself, but understanding who are people with similar styles or personalities that might like what you're doing. Because one of the trends I've seen is a direction towards personalities, going beyond brands and major companies and brands. People like, the reason YouTube is successful is because people see a face and they like that person. And understanding that that's how people are starting to go, that these, with social media, someone who is an important, influential figure doesn't only influence people with their primary work, but what they tweet about what they eat. So when some famous person tweets about what they're doing, people take note on all of those different levels. So if if Felicia Day says, wow, check out this great new web series, that can make or break you. I mean, that can be, what gets your attention in the same way that a huge marketing push in previous days would have done. So I say really understanding who you're trying to reach and how you're going to reach them. I mean, do you know anyone who knows this person? Are there any blogs or websites that you think might pick it up? Understanding that from the very beginning. So as you're writing, as you're producing, and as you are editing, you understand why any given person might want to share your work, because it's not about marketing dollars to pay, to put your thing on TV and to have your trailer for your film on TV or something. It's about how can you reach people organically.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to totally pull that over to you, because you guys have in some ways diametrically opposed marketing concepts, because he's I'm going to aim for Neil deGrasse Tyson, and you, I know, appeal to the gamer, the geek, and that is a low level, but very widespread, more individual network concept. And the difference between your long tail and your fat tail concept in your networking is totally awesome. So tell me about that.
Well, sure. We, if you look at our views on our channel, we don't have a lot that would suggest that we're successful. We're lucky on some vids to break into 5 figures. But the number that really makes us successful is our ratio of contribution dollars to viewers. This is we have fewer than the millions that we'll attract on several YouTube channels and whatnot. But the people who are watching our material are fiercely loyal to it and fiercely devoted and love it. Mm-hmm. It's tapping into that. There was the model that was floated several years back, the true fan model, of if you find people who will fall in love with your work, and they do want to fall in love, they want to forge an emotional connection with the creators of the content and know that when I am contributing to this, I am directly influencing the ongoing nature of the series. Mm-hmm. And what they love is, especially if you're able to respond to them, and when you have a smaller viewership or a more intimate viewership, mm-hmm. you are more able to answer tweets and Facebook posts and emails and make it so that you, it's a corollary of being a face that people recognize, or it's more as you're an actual real person who you can have conversations with, who you can share fears and concerns and tips and strategies on how you'd like to get started on your own. We've seen a number of people who began as fans start forging into creating their own material as well. Darn it, sorry. I'm quite bad at that. But specifically answering the earlier question of how would you start thinking about doing stuff for Transmedia, I think it really depends on the nature of the story that you want to tell. First thing to decide is, is this a linear story, or is this something that can be encountered in any order? Like if you're breaking it apart so that, say, someone may encounter a piece of video or an ad or a tweet or a Facebook post on your project first, and that's the first entry level in. Does it have to be, point A for the storytelling for them to understand what's going on? Could they encounter a blog? Could they encounter the fake history of the world that you've put up mm-hmm. first and have that make sense? Will one inform the other? Can you see the video first and then go to it, or is it going to make sort of no sense to them? So one of the things we've discovered with the second season of our web series is episodes, the first few episodes are so heavily contingent on having seen the first series that we had to dump a whole bunch of information into the comments and into the pop-ups of go take a look, it's free, there's no sign up, go watch to understand what's going on there. Mm-hmm. So it would be a nature of just deciding what is the nature of the story that you're trying to tell, and then specifically if you're doing internet video, understanding that you're under the same obligations as any storyteller, and that is an interesting, compelling story, well told. Niche doesn't matter. What does matter is you have to remember that the internet audience is the most fickle, easily distracted, ADD-ridden audience you will ever encounter. And if you don't impress them within 6 to 10 seconds, they're gone. They don't even have to reach for a remote. It's as easy as a click or a hotkey, and they're on to something else.
And I want to jump on that. When someone asks me that question in not a panel form, my simplest answer is almost exactly that. I say, if you are going to a film festival and there's a short film session, so you sit down and watch 20 or however many short films, you're not going to watch the first 10 seconds of any short film and walk out of the theater. You're not going to be like, this is dumb, and leave. Mm-hmm. No one does that. No one just is like, this first 10 seconds didn't grab me. But they will do they will do that thing on the internet. They'll say, this first 10 seconds doesn't matter to me, I'm done. And they can leave instantaneously because it's the internet.
And what's nice also about anything you're packaging as transmedia is it allows your media to exist in different forms. So like the feature that we're working on now will also be released in a segmented form on the internet. It will have to go through severe re-editing to fit that. Because if you start the way that you would a movie with an opening credit sequence, this is bullshit, I'm out of here. Yeah. I'm willing to watch a 55-second credit card commercial to watch a dog roller skating, but show me opening credits and I'm gone.
I walk out of theaters all the time
all
because
the
there's opening credits. I'm like, these opening, I'm out.
So, jumping on that one, actually, there are some discussions of what exactly transmedia is, and I've heard positive by some people that breaking up the same story into parcels. So telling the same story again in a different media or medium is not truly transmedia, but actually breaking the narrative up amongst your platforms is a true transmedia experience. Does anybody have an opinion on those? Because it's such a nobody has a definition of it.
Well,
So what do you guys think?
That's it exactly. It's the Wild West. I mean,
Yeah.
there is. I think that I don't think it's fair to say it's not transmedia unless it exists in several different forms. It has to be print and video and game for it to qualify. But I think the nature of transmedia is that it is new media, and that it can, not necessarily that it has to, but that it can cross from one media to another, and that it can be segmented or recombined or repackaged so that the web series can function as a backdoor TV pilot, can function as a feature film for a film festival program. It can function as an advertisement for the company and a reel and whatnot.
Yeah, I was going to jump in. I agree. I think that if you had a story you told through 30-second clips, that's not necessarily a film. What is that? Like, I think transmedia to me is whatever doesn't fall within a specified format. TV shows are a specified format. People understand how to make a pilot and to put it on, put it on TV. And I'd even argue that web series are becoming more standardized in what people are expecting out of a lot of web series.
I agree with that, yeah.
And it's the people who say, well, I am going to, tell my story through an iPhone app, and then that also connects to videos, and now, you play the game, and then you get the next video clip or something. But at that point, it's almost a video game. So I think the whole point is it's not really an easy definition.
No, it's not.
And I think that's the real problem right now, is defining how do we talk to each other in a way so that when I say a word, it means the same thing to you. And I usually start that talk by saying, well,
I need an app.
There's two other words
What does that mean?
that I hear: cross-platform and multi-platform, and transmedia. Are those the same thing? Are they different? Are they in some way connected to each other? And how are they connected to each other? I would say for cross-platform, you have one piece of media that's been created, whether that is a film, a TV show, a web episode, or a short film, a micro short, digital short, whatever you want to call it. It's one thing that doesn't change over the different platforms. So it can cross any platform, it's agnostic, and it will play on any device, any platform. So having a strong definition of, are we talking about a cross-platform project, where you're writing it once, but we're repurposing it into multiple, or across multiple platforms. Whereas a multi-platform, you maybe break down to a narrative style of, well, look, in this platform, we're telling biographies of our characters. In this platform, we're telling the love story between this character and that character. In this platform, we're telling a political story that these characters inhabit the world that we've already defined within. Then you get down to what's real transmedia.
Yeah. I think
So, to sum that up, multi-platform, I've made a record, I've made a book, I've made a TV show, I've made a DVD collection, I've made a narrative film. Those are all separate platforms that I all need a separate device to play with. Transmedia in my mind means I only need one device to play all those forms of media. And that's where a tablet becomes, is this a true transmedia device? Where it consolidates all of those platforms into one device, but yet I can still have the same experience of each of the different mediums within that device. I can play a record on my iPhone, and it can look like an app, and it'll spin a graphic, and it'll look like a record player, and it'll have that same experience.
Cool. Yes.
So, part of the beauty of where the film industry is at the moment is like the tools to create, films are democratized, right? Everyone has access to them. From what I'm hearing, if you're talking about a true transmedia project, the barrier of entry for filmmakers in many respects will be access to technology and the expense of that. Is that a fair assessment? So what are those barriers, and what are we really looking at in terms of, like, is it truly a democratic process, and do filmmakers have access to it?
depends on your ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that you know, even in the kind of the opening talks, like one of the things I said is, you know, if you want to be kind of a new filmmaker and someone who's actually going to be changing the industry and making big strides, you need a developer. You need to partner with someone who can actually develop things. And yeah, I'd argue that in a lot of ways, it's actually less open. It's more open to make films as you're making video. If you want to make a video, technology has allowed for cameras to be cheaper. The editing suites are cheaper, computers are cheaper, everything's cheaper. But at the same time, if you want to move and be pushing the industry forward and doing something new, then you need iPhone developers, then you need front-end developers, back-end developers potentially, then you need actually a lot more, because it ends up...
Well, your production team changes.
Exactly.
It's evolving.
Yeah.
So now on set, you need a DIT as a perfect example.
Yeah.
It used to be a film loader. Now that's an IT person.
Mhm.
But they're essentially doing the same job. It's just the technology has driven them to evolve. And I think that's what's happening now with production crews, when you're talking about needing different types of people.
That said, I think the barrier for entry is lower than it's been because there are access to the tools, and because you could theoretically even shoot, not that it would be good, but on an iPad, and you could edit it and upload it all from the same platform. Now that's, of course, made it a lot easier for people to upload stuff. So people can now, because the barrier for proving yourself as a qualified storyteller is gone, because anyone can do that with their own money. You know, it's not an investment of several $100,000s of risk of, I'm going to trust you with this film or this pilot or this game, whatnot. There's a glut of material of questionable quality up there, and so curation becomes a big problem, especially when you're starting out. But I think that's, while it's easier for people to create videos and put them on the internet where they may be viewed, still a solid grounding in visual vocabulary and filmmaking technique is required, storytelling technique specifically. I mean, you're under the same under the same stipulation that filmmakers have always been, is you are able to tell a story with only two senses, sight and sound. And if you don't really know how to do that, or you're kind of floundering your way through that, it's going to show. People are going to click away.
So this very naturally leads us into another big topic that was one of our top vote getters, which is how should one consider integrating web into one's storytelling mechanisms?
Thoughtfully.
Is there a point in the process which it is better or less good to start it? Is there, you know, what people do you need to consider even ahead of time?
So I've done a lot of different marketing and client work, and you know, there's nothing worse than you kind of come up with an idea and they're like, cool, we got this thing, now let's put a website around it, or like just do something just because we can. And I'd say the part of the process is the inception. I mean, starting with it, and I think even beyond calling ourselves, if you're in this realm and doing all these things, I think beyond filmmakers, I'd almost go more generic in the end and say storytellers or world builders. One thing that I've always been impressed with your guys' work is, as you said, you're building a world around what you're doing. And you know, whether that is a traditional web series format, or as I say traditional, but a web series format, or a video game, or other things like that, that's becoming, you're building worlds. And so, you know, start at the very beginning and think, you know, well, if I were to make this web series, this video project, what kind of website, or what kind of interactive experience, what kind of mobile app might I make? Maybe you're not making it now, but you have an idea of like, how could this all integrate? You know, what storytelling, you know, what is there an evil corporation involved in my world that would be great to have this cool app? You know, it's like, what kind of things can all work together? And thinking about that from the very beginning, because otherwise you're just tacking stuff on. You're just like, cool, we could, you know, do this thing and then we'll put it on a t-shirt. You know, it's like someone who designs merch, like, man, what if we made t-shirts? Like, yeah, man, we could put our logo on a t-shirt. Like, I want to see merch that makes sense and like integrates with what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Unless your show is about t-shirts, and then it's okay.
These t-shirts have such an awesome profit margin too.
Do we have any questions?
I just have a general question. Do you have examples? I mean, we're talking about this concept of transmedia where we see something on an iPad that has like a record, you know, something like a record, and maybe where you're reading a book or something. But is that something that's kind of like a concept in our mind that we're kind of
say the only real example I could point to is Bjork's app album.
Oh,
by
there's
Ophelia.
a lot of, yeah, there's Bjork's app album, which was a really good one. There was a show on MTV a couple of years ago called Rosemont, which was about a university, and it was actually produced by a gentleman who I think lives on Bainbridge. He's local, but he was one of the principal developers of the first alternate reality game, which they called The Beast. It was about the movie Artificial Intelligence. And he tells stories about how this game they had, it was a big studio film, so they had a lot of build up and build out around the project. But what happened was that it took off so virally that things that they had engineered to take weeks in some cases for the people involved to solve, the puzzle solvers, the everyday schmoes who were actually consuming the media, they were finishing these puzzles in the space of hours sometimes. So they actually were working 24/7 to try to stay ahead of things. And they had people going to phone booths in monsoons in Indonesia, I think it was, at 2 o'clock in the morning to receive a phone call. So this is the sort of thing where it actually crosses boundaries between media. And it wasn't just a computer game, it was actually a computer game and a film and a phone call.
Which even down the theater, I don't think we really talked about, but.
Yeah, and Rosemont was another one of his products, which was a university that this girl's brother had gone to and disappeared. So she actually assumed an identity and went to the university as a student to try to solve the puzzle. And via the phone app, you could actually apply to the university and become a student, at which point you could send text messages to the characters and you could actually interact real life with the principals of the show, but also with everybody else in the world who is having the same interaction that you're having.
So you became part of the world.
So you become part of the world, and it actually, in many cases, would inform what the plot choices were. They'd have their overarching plots, but their subplots were actually engineered based around the groundswell of user-generated content that they got.
So I would kind of disagree to a small point, because all the alternate reality games, everything like that, almost all of them have actually just been marketing campaigns. And while that is very much a transmedia experience, it isn't actually, I don't know, I guess I do them differently. I'm not sure if it was the Beast or, I know I Love Bees, I think that was the first one to do the phone one. I Love Bees was the thing about Halo 2. So each one of these things is, in general, connected to some larger property which is much more established. So even in our conversations of what we need to figure out, is transmedia, as we're saying, a viable medium yet? Or is it still just a way to promote traditional content? Because Halo 2 was clearly it was a console video game. AI was a Hollywood film.
Exactly.
So are there transmedia experiences or transmedia things that are developing and or aren't necessarily based around traditional things? Or is that the point? Does it always have to go back to some traditional moneymaker to fund the new stuff?
Well, the thing is, we're seeing a lot of transmedia used for something that is a more traditionally established format. What we're not seeing yet is something that lives as transmedia. Like that is its native format. And what form would that take? Because the very nature of it would be, there are parts of the story that you are not experiencing, or that you are going to be experiencing in a strange order, or that if it's something like go and receive a telephone call or map out these QR codes, which will only be up for a while, a majority of the audience will not have the option of participating in it, which can be frustrating. So.
Yeah, I've heard an interesting angle about exactly what you're saying, because you're right. Right now, in fact, many ways it's conflated. Transmedia is just marketing.
Well, there's no business motivation to experiment and explore.
Exactly.
Which is why you get companies that will either charge you $700 for their software so that you can start making and exploring, or you have companies that will give away the software because they just want we just want to see what you can make.
Right.
Yeah, but
there's no real business motivation for corporations right now to go outside of a traditional, let's take the web experience and move it to a mobile application. Let's take our traditional media and find another profit source, stream out of it.
And it's even before the internet, you had forms of transmedia when it was just the concept of, I want more of this world and I want more of this story. If it's a show, you can buy a novelization of the movie. You know, there's a soundtrack you can get. There's a game based on
Radio,
it.
television plays.
Yes, exactly.
Star Wars is a great example
There
because
you
there's
go.
tons of backstories, and oh, in the years between these two episodes, you have all of this plot that they build out.
Exactly, and if you are not interested in participating in that level as someone who knows the entire Star Wars canon, there's nothing in there that prevents you from enjoying the core movies, except the re-releases.
So I've actually heard it posited that right now where we are with Transmedia is in fact very similar to where movie pictures were in vaudeville, because movie pictures were actually used as a way to keep the audience in the seats in vaudeville houses. And eventually, well, people don't do vaudeville anymore, but cinema stayed because it became the medium of choice for the people developing content, as opposed to the live theatrical experience of vaudeville.
Is that a question?
No, it's just kind of a statement, and if you have thoughts on it, excellent, otherwise we'll just keep moving.
I mean, it's an excellent point in the history of American cinema, where American cinema didn't start as being projected on a screen. It was a Nickelodeon box with goggles, stethoscope, a wax ring, and a loop.
And it was marketing.
And you just cranked it, you put in your nickel, you looked at it. It wasn't a communal experience. It was, like you're saying, a trip to get people into the room to watch a live theatrical play. And then it only became projected once the French figured out, oh, we can cram in a whole bunch of people in one place, charge more.
How can we charge more? That's going to be a good question. Speaking of charging more, our next happy topic is, how does one integrate transmedia properties on a budget? There was a
You tell the story that is the story, and you don't tell the story that isn't the story.
What does that mean?
Well, I can say, here's an example. We're going through budgeting for the new feature. And of course it has elements of fantasy and it has elements of combat in there. The combat is not the story. The character choices and interactions are the story. So one thing that we've done, I've been doing films for about 14 or 15 years now, it's actually become a signature style thing, is if there's something that's far too complicated for us to do well in our budget, because there's some stuff that you can do, whether it's combat or effects and whatnot, that you can get by with, that's good enough. There's also a point where if you try to stretch it beyond that, it just looks cheesy and ridiculous and it takes people out of the movie. So what we do in that case is we cut away and we show a reaction to it happening, right? Let the audience imagine what happened. They usually get a good laugh out of it. We save ourselves, at this point, thousands of dollars of art design and training and safety for it. And you're still telling the story while leaving out the parts that aren't.
So I would say for me, the practical answer to what you're saying is actually, it's a little more complicated. You can't do a lot of this stuff. I mean, you can do it on a budget, but you still need that budget.
Yeah.
And my perspective is, and this goes back to what I kind of said originally, is you have to establish yourself. You have to know, people have to know why they're going to donate to your Kickstarter. Let's say, if you want to do a Kickstarter, with where you guys were, you had already had under your belts a successful film, correct? Is that so? People looked at that and said, "Oh, the guys who made this are now making this," and you got to have that. In the same way that when you're reaching out to investors or you're reaching out to the general public for something like a Kickstarter, you have to be able to build out a track record of what you've done and what you've done and why it's worth their time.
Exactly.
And so I think I would argue right now, if someone wanted to make, a story and tell a story like you guys did, if they hadn't had that kind of successful independent film under their belts, they wouldn't be able to build up the same momentum they need. Because you need a large team of people and you need the credibility to get the funding.
That's true. And when we started, before the age of Kickstarter and YouTube and whatnot, we started very low, and we deliberately stretched our budget. We begged, borrowed, and stole what we could to make something beyond the production value of the budget that we had. I think that though we are able to, because we have a track record, say, here's the stuff that we've done before, which we make it a policy to release it all on Creative Commons so that we can actually say in Kickstarter videos now, go and watch it. Go take 45 minutes or 2 hours or 3, whatever, by the end of this next one, and if you like it, then come back and help us make the next one. If you can't rely on that, then you need to get them to invest in you. Why are you, the filmmaker, someone I want to give money to? And the way that you do that is you tell the story of you. Hi, my name is Matt. This is the project that I want to make. This is what it's going to look like, and this is what I'm going to do with it. There was an 8-year-old kid ran a Kickstarter for a project called Z-, a zombie movie. The guys from Bandersnatch Studios are helping out with the effects. And he basically said, I'm an 8-year-old kid and I want to make this awesome zombie movie. Here's what I would do in it. And people are like, oh my God, I am so backing this. Is this going to be a good movie? Is it going to be a movie with great technical quality? I don't know, and I don't care. I want to see this movie because that kid's passion is going to translate into the film, and it is going to be delightful. I got to read part of the script, and oh my God, is it amazing? There's one point where the cop says we can pay for it with my boxing money. Oh my God. And they're not kid parts either, right? It's written for adults. It's going to be amazing. I want to see that. And the kid's passion translates. You want to invest in that guy. The guy who made Cards Against Humanity, which has just this evil, wonderful card game.
Yeah.
That's exploded all over the Kickstarter and is now, like, they released their second expansion, and it was the core set and the first 2 expansions were the top 3 game sellers on Amazon right now. He's had 3 successful Kickstarter campaigns, and he says basically, look, you introduce yourself, you say what it is that you want to do, you show them an example of it, and you say how you'll deliver it. You keep it short and succinct. Because people, I mentioned this earlier, people are looking for stuff to fall in love with. They're looking for stuff to invest in emotionally. The investment, I mean, it's the same situation, and it's not, to be self-contradictory, as a traditional film or project where you're taking investment. Except the investment is not financial. The people don't expect to get back a return. What they expect is to enjoy what you make. Their investment is emotional. They want to say, I was a part of this. I will happily contribute this to get a DVD at 2 or 3 times the price that I would normally pay for it, so that I can say my name is in this and I loved it and I was involved all the step of the way, and I got one that was only available during the window of the Kickstarter time being open. So if you can't sell yourself on your prior record, or you're building your prior record, sell your own passion and make yourself a character in the story that is the creation of your project.
Nice. Yes, Amy.
Maybe not a very popular question, but one I'm curious about. Is this evolution of storytelling in any way either anesthetizing audiences or jeopardizing storytelling in general? Like, are we doing?
I don't think it's jeopardizing storytelling. I've heard a great term of becoming digital storytellers.
Yeah, I don't think in any way it's jeopardizing storytelling. In a lot of ways.
Or is it changing storytelling? If so, how? Like, that's more.
Oh, I mean, for sure, it's changing storytelling.
So.
I think a great example here I'd want to bring up isn't exactly what we're talking about, but even how video games are becoming more cinematic. They're becoming so much more, and there is something about even telling a story through a medium like video games that changes the thing. It's different to be watching a story and to relate to the main character because they are going through something that you can relate to. It's another thing to be playing the character and taking the actions as them and feeling the gravity of the fact that you just shot someone or something. I forgot what game it was. There's some hilarious game or something where, like, it's a normal first-person shooter and you're running around shooting people, and every time you kill someone, like you kill a guard, it shows you flashes of their family. And it shows you their kids. And that's the kind of thing that it makes you question what your character is doing and even what you're doing. And I would still say that is very much storytelling, in the same way that live theater challenges audience members to participate in a way that's different than a passive film viewing experience.
So what does that change mean for the production of film?
This is the part that's a little bit, that's kind of interesting to me, is that doing film's already hard enough, right? Like, it's technically difficult. You have to have a great idea, you have to tell it visually well, you have to be able to hear it, then you have to be able to operate a computer to put it together, and then you gotta do whatever, right? It's a completely different skill set to make an app, and a completely different skill set to tell a story on the web, right? And I would also venture to say that maybe the web might not be the best medium for stories the way that we tell stories in film. You know, with like a climax and like with this length or whatever. And apps might be the same, you know? So it's kind of like a little bit of a limitation or a little bit of the thing that's making me stop from being able to like envision something that's like completely transmedia the way that you were talking about it, is that they're just completely different skill sets, and they're hard to kind of imagine a narrative running across platforms that's going to be, you know, kind of engaging, or that's even going to be kind of coherent. Plus, we don't have like a collaboration structure put together. Like, I know photographers to call and sound recorders to call, but I don't know a developer to call because we're at a film conference. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of interested in that. I mean, it's not a pointer.
I guess the thing that I see is we are at a shifting point, and do you think that live theater actors were, you know, when they transitioned into silent film, like the differences that people experienced there was a struggle. You know, when we went, you know, when we had radio and people were like, well, why would you want to, you know, you could see something live in person, why would you want to just listen to it? And so every step along the way, I mean, if you appreciate the format and want to have the traditional feature film format, it is a format. That is how you might want to tell a story, and there's a certain skill sets related to that. Much like if you wanted to put on a live play, it's going to be different than what it takes to make a film. And they're both legitimate ways of telling stories, but they're very different skill sets.
Does anyone follow there's a television series and a game, sci-fi, aliens are involved. It starts with a D, maybe.
Oh.
They advertise that all over PAX.
Yeah, I don't remember. I didn't know what you're talking about though.
Has it been released? Is anyone playing it, watching it? I've seen the ads.
Chris.
Just to kind of address this gentleman's question, I mean, it seems to me that what this provides, and I think we're just in the very beginning stages of it, is an opportunity for sort of increasing creative collaboration. Yes, a filmmaker maybe doesn't have the coding experience or knowledge or perhaps even interest in terms of learning, you know, the actual nuts and bolts of what it requires to create an app or create a video game. But there are people out there who do, and it seems that as part of the creative process, what we're now provided with is the opportunity to now interact with those people, finding people who share the passion for whether it's a project or whether it's a larger sort of world that you're creating out of that, and giving them the freedom to take what their technical expertise and interest is and run with it in a way that you know, hasn't been really done to the extent that I think that the digital media provides us. I mean, I think, you know, you can go back literally to, you know, Og the hunter back in the caveman days, who, you know, came home with the kill, and everybody's like, well, how did you do that? And he tells the story, you know, and then somebody else says, wow, you know, I could put that on the wall. I could put these pictures, yeah, telling the story, you know. It's exactly, I mean, that's, you know, the most crudest basic form, but that's a transmedia experience. And so somebody has this story that they want to tell, they're very passionate about it, and that passion infects somebody else who has a completely different skill set, and but finds a way to interpret that story in their own way, and then it just keeps sort of snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. And now we're at a point where we now have the technology to turn that story into any kind of creative medium, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be the same story. I mean, it could be an offshoot of the story. It's like, I can imagine somebody, you know, doing a film, and there's a book in the film that's a completely fictional book, and somebody says, I want to write that book. And somebody else says, well, I want to make a movie of that book that was in the movie. You know, I mean, the possibilities are endless, but it's a matter of connecting with creative individuals who have the specific skill sets to do those specific things. But it doesn't require, you know, either the visionary or the one individual to have to be the expert in all of those. You just have to find other people who are.
Well, and tying that back into what Forrest was saying was that 20, 30 years ago, a filmmaker doing computer work was unheard of. Final Cut, you really? I mean, so it's one of those where the skill sets have changed, and we've, in some ways, not really taken a whole lot of note because it was doing the same thing using a different methodology. Well, now we're just taking the next step into, okay, the people who actually have expertise with the methodology from the other side starting to find their creative abilities. So instead of coming at it from the filmmakers growing into computer people, find computer people who can grow into storytellers as well, and building and removing the silos that we were talking about earlier. And we've got developers and we've got filmmakers.
And let's be very clear, not every project needs to be transmedia.
No.
Or should be transmedia. There are some things, film project, that will work better as a web series because it's again, a very segmented story with a lot of cliffhangers that can be told in small chunks. And there's some that are better as movies, there's some that are better as novels, and some that work better as games. You know, we shouldn't feel like we are under the obligation to have our media exist in multiple formats. Because sometimes, you know, you're going to be trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and it's just going to be bad.
Yes.
I went to the ballet last night, and I don't know if I would have wanted to watch a movie of the exact thing I just saw. Like the experience of going to the ballet was something, and seeing Cinderella, seeing that same ballet on film, I'd be bored. I wouldn't want to watch 2.5 hours of just like people dancing on video. Like I wouldn't want that. It was the experience of being there in live theater.
No, and if you did put a 2-hour ballet on the internet, people would tear it up.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you imagine the comments that would be? Whereas if you're yes.
Yeah.
You are not able to appreciate the art unless you are there seeing it, the music coming from all sides, and the musculature and the grace of the dancers seen in actual depth of vision.
Yeah.
It would be like watching Lawrence of Arabia on a laptop, which I've done. It loses so much.
Yeah, I can see that.
You said the
We're gonna
ballet
go
was Cinderella?
there and then there.
You said the ballet you saw was Cinderella?
Yeah,
Well, Cinderella's in a lot of different media.
that's true. But that was a different. It's the same story, but it's still a different.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, I'm saying you tell the Cinderella story for film. You don't tell the Cinderella ballet story on film. So that's. I mean, I agree with you, but they're tailored, and it's the understanding that you don't go, well, that's no idea for a film. Let's make it an app. You know, it's like it has to be appropriate. And so yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said.
Yes. I just want to say something on the realm of like having those silos. We're in a really fortunate position here in Seattle where we have a huge tech industry and we have a very budding film industry, and large. I have to say large for budding. And I know I work in software as well as act, and the number of people I talk to who are working at Microsoft or working at Amazon or whatnot, who want sexy projects, who want to say, yeah, on my off time, I built this really awesome thing that you can see, and everyone's going to go to and be like, that's amazing, you built that, and that's a thing, and that's a story, and I can get into it. So I think it's less about worrying that we're at a film thing and we can't connect. It's more about saying that most of these people wear different hats too, and that there is a very close community of people who want to be more involved.
Yeah, on that note, I mean, a lot of the skills that we already have that are present in this room are what you would need to create a transmedia project. Again, it goes back to the basics, back to Og the Caveman. Is it an interesting story? Am I compelled to it? Do I see myself in it? There, you have a story. Tell me that story. If you do it well, it doesn't matter what genre or medium or format it comes through.
Sure, yeah, you don't necessarily need an app, you can have a comic book.
I think you bring up an interesting point, and we have a very unique situation here in Seattle. We have both, we have some of the film of LA, but some of the Silicon Valley of the Bay Area, and the problem the thing that people are hitting their heads against is always the same problem that everyone hits their heads against is money. You know, if I say, man, I have this crazy idea to make a film project, internet thing with this and this and this. It's really hard to find traditional investors for something that is totally untested, because often investors want to invest in things that have any track record of ever. You know, they want to have some track record. But we're in a unique opportunity where someone who does work at Microsoft or someone who does have a development job doesn't necessarily need to make a ton of money trying out this new project. And we need to develop an industry here in Seattle if we want to do this. We need to develop the industry and have that track record to say, hey, for fun, we did this great project, but it transitioned into this amazing property that's wildly successful. And then people can go back and say, I want to do a similar thing, and here's a track record of the people we took from this project. But you have to start a track record somewhere, and someone has to take the risk. And in today's economy, there's not as many investors willing to just throw money at film as it is. And if you're lucky enough to come up with some new transmedia idea that someone can throw you $1 million, great. But I have not found many of those people.
Yeah. Film has never been a safe investment. There are far more boring, more reliable ways to get a return on your investment. It's, if people are investing in film, it's always because it's exciting and sexy. So, just expect that.
One there,
That hasn't
and then
changed.
you, and then here. So.
I would like to talk a little bit more about interactivity, because that's a word that gets thrown around a lot. I want to know, like, above and beyond make a game out of it, what are some, like, transmedia interactive components that people can actually create?
Well, it depends on what you mean by interactivity. If you mean during the creative process, having your fans, your dedicated fans, being involved and participating, and I know that you guys do something where you
Red card.
Yeah. We've done a number of things on the last two projects for the new season of Journey Quest. There was active involvement that stemmed from very low levels of contribution. You could help coin a word in a fictitious language that might get used in the show. And that will go into the dictionary that will be available for people. And some people at a higher level got. So you can, right there, I have a word. It's official. It's in the language. It's got grammar and everything. It's got my name next to it and what I based it after. At high level rewards, we had people come on, have speaking roles in the show. You'll be on set all day. You'll see how the process goes. You get your entry on IMDb, and you hang out with the cast and crew all day. There's that level of involvement. If you're talking about involvement of steering the narrative, though, then you're getting into more video game territory. And then it gets really tricky because there's a point where you have to decide what are the choices that I give. I worked for a video game company for a year. We were working on a project that was a branching narrative story game. And the problem we always ran up against was how many options can you give? Because there's a point where you're going to have to thwart or frustrate the player because there's an option that they want that doesn't exist. Or the options that do exist, don't let them take the way that they want to go. And if you're used to being the agent driving the action in a video game, whether it's a sandbox game or whatnot, that becomes frustrating, and that's how you lose viewers or people. So it's, and also the more options that you add, the more production you're creating. The heavier, deeper, more expensive thing that you're creating. So,
and I'll add a complication.
Please, complicate.
As a developer, hearing that, it would be like, why don't I make you an app that allows a user to put in the app, oh, I want to do this now. Sends it to you, you guys write it up, update the app, now it's part of it. That's a level of interactivity that drives the development, but at the same time also makes your product evergreen, where it's constantly changing, constantly evolving through audience building.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't exist, but it could with current technology.
So yeah, interactivity really kind of spans the gamut from one person who gets all of the content shoved at them and they incorporate what they choose on the simplest level, and then you have the complication of anybody in the world can give you anything in the world and it gets implemented.
But it, leads to a point of there's just a lot of experimentation that hasn't happened yet. There's just so much technology out there right now that, again, corporations don't want to risk. So they're not willing to experiment and try new things. And that's where a group like this, in a place like this, Seattle specifically, you have so much technology, so many talented artists, and really, there is a lot of money in this town. The problem is connecting that money with the people. And, for better or for worse, nobody's really looking at what we're doing in this town. They're either going to Portland or Vancouver.
Yep.
So it's a unique opportunity to really experiment and drive something that can be very unique to the city. But again, it's about team building at that point, finding the right people and connecting them.
I mean, I would say that at this point, I've heard a lot of talk, people saying, how the film industry as it is struggling, or there's so many issues in Seattle, and the fact that they had to say that this shouldn't be a bitch session is clearly an indicator of that. But it's not until you kind of have nothing left to lose that you're willing to take the risks that can be game changers, that can change the way people consume media and move forward.
I have to give a plug.
Yeah, I was gonna say, talking about.
So just for a point of reference, Filmworks started the Innovation Lab. Our second cycle is the Innovation Cycle, which we're launching in December, which, to great credit to some of the people here today, we've been consulting with to develop something that combines all of these elements. what we are going to, what we're asking our storytellers to do is to create a world. I don't know, totally gonna use that in our materials, by the way, and pitch us ideas. And we have funding associated with it, which is the point. We have $350,000 a year to commit to these concepts and ideas and incubate them, because we see, as you guys are discussing, this is the future of, you know, our industry in many ways. So I just wanted to make you aware of that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but in some ways it is the green stamp. So instead of the way that their first cycle works, which is you have to have a funding plan and then they will give you some implementation money, this actually is you give them your business proposal and all of your development cycle and what you need. They will give you a certain amount of grant that you can then use as the green stamp for your fundraising efforts, because it is such a new model. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, that is absolutely correct. And I think that the second part of that, and it's a longer term strategy, it won't probably happen during this first cycle, is to, the reason I asked the question about the barrier of entry in terms of development costs and things like that is I think as the state film program, as we like to call ourselves sometimes, there's an opportunity to leverage some of that with partnerships, you know, whether it's at the UW or whether it's at, you know, I don't know where those partnerships exist right now, to, you know, bring down those costs, so that we can tell stories in interesting ways. So we're not gonna get it right the first time, that's my big thing, but, you know, we are acknowledging all the things that you're saying and putting money towards it in a real way, and so this will continue to evolve and develop. So I hate to plug what we're doing, but that is an opportunity that will exist for, you know, this community soon.
Cool. I mean, just to answer your barrier here, I mean, we're in the Northwest Film Forum. There's an editing lab with all the software you can use, $5 an hour. You know, membership's only $45 a year. You can rent every production tool that they have. I mean, becoming a member here and using their facilities, you can do your project very, very cheaply, very, very well,
And you also have
and high quality.
And you also have the opportunity here and in other places like at the film and music industry happy hours to meet the other people who have the skills that you don't, and to start networking and working together on things. And if you don't have the funds to hire someone, you have your own talent too. Maybe you can work out at a trade swap in that thing. You know, I'm a writer and a filmmaker. I have no programming skill, but I have a couple of marketable skills that I would be willing to, on the right project, trade for. Work together, build contacts, build a rapport, because people like to work with people they've worked with before and have a shorthand with. You do this enough times, you start to build a group that trusts one another and can start to get a cohesive vision that you can go to potentially ask for a grant or something, because you have, again, a working track record, a working team, a working plan, and a shorthand and a reel that you can show. And it can start as organically as that.
What's something I think is really interesting that I feel being rehashed again in here and kind of this community is, in a lot of ways, it feels very opposite to what I perceive as the kind of Hollywood mentality of going down there and making it for yourself and being yourself and doing it for yourself. And that, you know, there's nothing wrong with us saying as a community here in Seattle that we're going to potentially take a different approach, and that it's much more about building the community and it not being, I mean, here in the U.S. it's a bad word to say it's not about the individual because people are like socialist, but that it's, you know, it takes a community to start fostering the kind of innovation and these other things. You know, it doesn't, you know, one person just can't do it by themselves.
I'll try not to rant on this subject, but when I went to film school, I was sentenced to 5 years in Los Angeles, and encountered that exactly thing. It was detrimental for you to sometimes collaborate, or to help, or to share credit, because everyone is there trying to be heard above the din. Whereas here, we have the ability to be much more of a community. And specifically when we're talking transmedia, we're talking about stuff that does not exist in a time slot on television. There is no reason that your show and my show can't have the same fan base. It's not like they're both on at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, okay? Our films are not opening opposite one another at the theater and the audience has to choose, okay? It is free and available for anyone who wants to see it at any time through most media. So there is absolutely no reason we shouldn't be promoting the hell out of one another.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, because I mean, we have at Zombie Orpheus, we have a pretty actually very large dedicated fan base, but that is geographically dispersed. If we were, one of the things that would really benefit us and anyone else here is to build and institute a local fan base that knows that this, if you go to Transmedia, New Media, Film Forum, whatever, you're going to have a quality experience even if you don't know necessarily what it is. Look at how easily stuff could be put together. Like the shows that we've produced, we produce maybe 60 to 90 minutes of footage in a year. That can live as a web series, but as nothing else. But if you had a number of series, a number of shows together, and then were to chop them up because they are all modular in nature, suddenly you could create a variety show of 3 to 4 episodes of different web series, different reviews, different cooking shows, different games, whatever, fill a half-hour block of time.
It's
and
like
suddenly,
Love American style for the 2010s.
Exactly, and that's just with what we have available right now.
See,
And I
there's
think you
couple
bring up a
of
great
guys.
point, which is, you as a group produce 60 to 90 minutes of content a year, and it's really hard to argue that your 60 to 90 minutes of content per year is going to take that 60 to 90 minutes away from me. Like, it's like,
It's ours!
Exactly, because that's the thing, is that 60 to 90 minutes is one sitting of one thing. I mean, it's like, someone sits down and goes, I'm going to watch an evening of this. And, we're not competing in that same way because
They're spending 6 hours a day on their computers. You're
exactly.
not competing.
I mean, arguably with all the content that I've made with my web series and these other things, and all of the content I've made, a person who was just bored on a Saturday and Sunday could watch all of our content in a couple, in like a day, like a day or two. It's like, well, that's 1 or 2 days out of a year, so that we're not really hurting each other.
All right, see you next year when you have a new movie or show out.
So I'm going to quickly go back to the music film happy hour because it's music film interactive, and
yes.
everybody leaves that part off. So I'm going to challenge everybody in the film group, bring an interactive person with you. You know developers. Everybody in this town knows at least one developer, at least one software geek, at least one tech code monkey. Bring them. Interactive is part of that description, and no one remembers it. So that's your challenge. Okay, next question. Yes.
In talking about finding investors and establishing your track record, there's the quantity side of your track record, how many views that happen, and there's the quality audience engagement of it. So if you're selling your track record by the quality audience engagement, what are you using to document that, and how are you proving that to your investors that might come on?
You use the content itself as the proof. And if you're basing yourself on the quality and you don't have the high numbers, this is a lot of companies, a lot of investors, they won't look at you unless you have 1 million views on something. They'll say, you don't have 1 million views, I don't care, I don't want to see it. Because they're thinking return, they're thinking you make money on the internet through selling banner ad space, t-shirts, and ads on the video, right? So if I know that this video is going to get one, if you have a show and people subscribe to it, then every week you're putting out an episode that 1 million people are going to see, and there's an ad on it that generates a percentage of cents every view. That's something that's marketable to them. They can say, I don't care what the content is as long as you've got the bit there. If you're selling yourself on quality, you can't necessarily go to the same investors who you would market to on quantity, because you're selling different things. You're either selling your content or you're selling your hit count. And the two don't necessarily have to be the same thing. If they are, fantastic. You're doing wonderful work.
Thank you.
And
and you are as well. And I would say that the difference in the philosophy of what you're saying, if you want to pitch to investors, have the view count. If you want to pitch to your fans, if you want to engage the people who like you, and you say, if every one of you, and this, I love that you brought up at the beginning, the Uber fan or whatever, the fan philosophy of like, if you as an individual music artist had 1,000 dedicated fans, like you could be an artist full time. Because then you have 10,000 kind of iffy fans, and you maybe have 50,000 people who know of you. But that if you want to pitch to people who like you and cast a wide net, these days it is about the quality. It's about engaging with those people. If you want to pitch to an investor who sees dollars, you need to show them, I have this many million views, this many million fans. It doesn't matter. I mean, it actually frustrates me because I know people who have, we have hundreds of thousands of YouTube subscribers, but their engagement and their actual they don't look. A lot of these people don't look very deep. They go, oh, you have this many views, great, we'll throw money at you. But they don't actually know if their quality, if there's any content there, if it's worth anything. But the companies are still experimenting. So to pitch to investors, I say numbers. To do a Kickstarter or to sell merchandise, sell something that, if you're giving away your story for free, say literally just, if everyone gave us $1, here we'll send you this thing, this little postcard. If you give us $1, if you have 10,000 fans, you just got $10,000. If you have 100,000 fans, you have $100,000. And 100,000 fans isn't a lot when you think of big projects and big views.
Mm-hmm. So have any of you gentlemen used view drop-off as a metricization? So, because you were saying, hit counts, and earlier you were saying that one of the metrics that you could use was the fact that you had so many dollars per viewer, which is a, huge engagement item. So what about the drop-off? Because we all know, like you said, the first 5 seconds.
There's a lot of stumble upon that you're going to get through, because a lot of people will link episodes and whatnot when they get, or retweet stuff when it comes out, and people take a look at it. A very good crossover rate is 50% from the first to the second episode. There's usually about a 50% or more drop-off. We're happy with the 50% drop-off, because again, half of that is stumbling along. If you get a press in something, people who don't know you or don't know what you're about will come and say, I don't know, it's not for me, or I'll see the next one later. But if you have people who hit subscribe or decide to pay attention to you, like your Facebook page or whatnot, that keeps those numbers up. And you are going to see a drop-off as it goes down, sort of a long tail situation again. And eventually they will stabilize and go up a bit as people discover the project after the fact. Because again, the nice thing about having your media live on the internet is it's there forever. This can also be a damning thing. It's there forever. Which is specifically why we release things under Creative Commons, and we don't, because one, we're not, the internet is very good at one particular thing that drives traditional media creators crazy, and that is making perfect, infinite copies of your work for free and distributing them for free. And you can either try to really fight something that is infinite with finite resources, which is a losing proposition. Or you can try to embrace it and realize anyone who, if you make a movie or a video or whatnot, you put it on the internet, it's going to be torrented. It's going to wind up on Pirate Bay. It just is. It's just what happens. Which is good, because it means I think it's a legitimate movie. And what that has the benefit of doing, and I'm not advocating piracy or anything whatnot, I'm just saying that is a thing that is. You can't argue that. But people who pirate stuff do it more as a matter of convenience than as a matter of I feel like I'm screwing over a corporation, whatnot. I want to see this. And when they see it, they are more likely to buy it. Like, we discovered this when the very first movie we did, which was a movie we did before YouTube, someone on our forum said, hey, someone put your movie up on YouTube. And we went there full of fire and brimstone to demand the guy take it down, and then realized he had about 500,000 views in every episode. And we said, hey, keep doing what you're doing. Because we realized that had coincided with a recent spike in DVD sales. So we actually enlisted the guy, we recruited the guy, and now he's another outlet on his YouTube channel.
He's a distributor for
exactly, yes. So you can make that work for you. I don't know how I got into this topic, so I'll gracefully bow.
I don't want to ask all the questions.
Do we have other questions right now?
Amy, you're doing just fine.
I'm curious, I have a question for Amy, is that okay? We're just cross-talking here, is that?
Yeah, we're talking about transmedia. As long as it's on topic, we can talk amongst ourselves.
All right, so on the topic of transmedia for the innovation cycle coming up in December, how much of that is, it sounds like it's a new area, so are you focused on a project that has multiple outlets or is interactive, or do you have real finite definitions on what will?
Well, I think it's premature in this moment for me to say it is this. We have been enlisting the advice of many experts in our community on the topic. The idea is to invite people to think creatively about how they tell stories and deliver stories. I think it's more generated around IP, intellectual property, and how you create opportunity for IP. I'll know a heck of a lot more after I write the guidelines and criteria with Jesse. Jesse works with me on this. But that's the direction that we're thinking as the future.
And you're announcing in December, is that right?
Well, that's when we're having our
12. So that's when the official, you need to do this, we would like to see that, is going to be disseminated.
And the season will open in January for applications.
So, there you go. And you had a question now.
I do. So, if you're betting, right, and you're all entrepreneurs in your own way, shape, and form, you know, what I hear or what I'm learning is that marketing is how people are integrating this at this point, right? But, you know, besides having banner ads or selling t-shirts, is there a business development strategy that you can see evolving? You know, will there be, and I say this because I read an article recently where Netflix and Hulu were at the upfronts with advertisers in New York pitching their original content, right? Is there a strategy that you think, what is the future of monetizing this if you were betting?
Our betting, our plan is to continue with the fan-funded model, and to not just look at if you look at the fan-funded model as something as in we are asking for donations, it's something that potentially is finite, because you're one bad project away from losing your donors or alienating your fan base. If you look at it also as these are pre-sales for merchandise that people would be purchasing anyway, then it has, you know, there's a bit more business acumen in there. And the stuff that we offer through Kickstarter rewards, and as stretch goals go up, you start adding more rewards across the level. Again, things people would ordinarily purchase, want to buy: DVDs, posters, t-shirts, autographed or personalized versions of any of those things. They're all limited edition versions, because once you're done, and here's the beautiful thing about running a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo campaign, once you have fulfilled all of the rewards that you've promised, any additional funds that come in, and you own the copyright to your material afterwards, so you can sell DVDs after the case, you can sell the distribution rights to your material after the campaign is over. That is all profit. So it's a very slow method to continue to build a library, a catalog of products, and a track record, and a media library. Now, the place that we're hoping to get to eventually is to build enough trust and enough of an audience that we don't need to use Kickstarter. We basically say, we're offering subscriptions. And again, everything is available for free. You don't have to subscribe to see anything. But if you trust us enough, at this level, like PBS or NPR, if you subscribe, then at the end of the year, we will send you the DVD of the movies that we make this year. We will send you the book, the art book that involves all the card art from the new Gamers movie that we're making. We will send you the dictionary that everyone contributed things to. So it becomes less of a project by project, will we make our goal thing, and more of an ongoing, you are in the fold, and thank you for keeping us alive. And every project, again, builds the catalog, builds the media library, and makes more and more stuff available for free, so that when people come in and discover you, then they see it's not just one day's worth, but maybe 3 or 4, a week's worth of material, all interrelated, because we've started doing that now, is we're interweaving characters and plot lines from the different franchises into one another. We're planting seeds for shows we don't plan to do for another 3 to 5 to 10 years, depending on how development continues, and let people discover that.
So I definitely I agree with that. I think I see it in a couple different directions, and that's one direction, as you said, with something like NPR. I mean, that, you know, they say, hey, do you trust us? Do you like us? Do you want us to continue doing what we're doing? Because if you don't pay us, we can't. You know, and I think that is one direction it's going to go. I think the accessibility of the internet and technology is allowing people to more directly connect with content creators, and, you know, I just kickstarted a game called Planetary Annihilation, which is a local game development company. And these guys, the track record, I trust them. They have made my favorite games of all time. And I go, cool, I will pay way more than I'm going to pay to a normal game to get early access, to be more involved in the process. Because really, I would pay you guys, I pay them $100 for a game that costs 20 to 15. And the reason was, I really want it to happen, and that it was worth spending that much, because I don't want to spend $20 for a game that sucks. I want to spend $100 for the game I want. And I think people are getting to that realm. Like, if you really like an artist, like, pick your favorite musician, and what if are they not recording right now? Would you give them $25, $50, $100 for them to record a brand new album and send it to you? You know, some people might say no, and some people might say, yeah, if they're not working anymore, I want them to work.
Well,
I want them to
jump in and qualify that point specifically, and to do that with zero studio influence, with zero marketing influence on what you have to do. You know, it's not like we're living in this wonderful time with where the web series allows you to tell a story that only needs to be as long as it could be. You know, there's a dead zone in programming in festivals and on television for if it's over 3 hours, if it's under 1 hour, dead zone. If you're doing a TV series and you don't have enough to fill a 6 or 13 or 24 episode season, all of which have 22 to 44 minutes with commercial breaks here, here, and here, and here, I'm sorry, you can't tell it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that is one direction it's going to go. I think that is a good direction, and that is something that is a sustainable direction for sure. The other direction I see it going is the fact that there still are mega companies like Google, who owns YouTube, who is looking for the next content. So even though television as we know it is shifting and changing, and some of those companies are not sure where they're sitting in terms of their traditional TV programming, there are companies that are putting in work to find the next thing and to do something new. And there will be some new service or some new, I wouldn't even call it television at this point. Something new will come around. I'm not sure if it's necessarily the holodeck, but there will be actually. There's some new stuff happening with Google and Google Glasses. So augmented reality. There's stuff that's happening with. There's a recent Kickstarter for a really affordable 3D headset. Where is that 3D environments that we were promised 20 years ago? Like, they're just sort of starting to maybe come back. So there are these other places that are brand new and are pushing the boundaries and have a lot of money to be made, but they're totally brand new, and it's going to be funded by companies like Google, I think, or because it's going to be startups who create an idea and have a concept and then get bought by a company like Google.
I would actually add that there's also a third model, because I've done some interviews with the people who are producing Transmedia, and one of them actually brought up the concept of Mutual of Omaha or the soap operas from way back when, because before commercials really existed, you had corporations that would just give money to the producers. They had nothing to do with the topic, they had nothing to do with the plot. They just said, here, make something and say that we're in charge. So you had your soap opera. We still call them soap operas because they were sponsored by the soap companies. So, but Rosemont, the one product that I was talking about earlier, they actually built it out on $5 million from Verizon Wireless. And every episode started with the girl looking on her phone, and they used actually a blanked cell phone and superimposed Verizon on it for the US market. Their contract was not exclusive outside of the US. So they got that $5 million, it was produced free and clear, and as soon as they were done with that, they repackaged it for every single other market in the world and contracted with other phone companies and with other sponsors that they could use logos and whatnot, and that was the only time you ever saw Verizon, even though they're the ones who paid for the whole thing. So that is actually a viable model that some people are using to very good effect to just produce.
I actually know of one example, a web series called Leap Year, I believe, is funded by some random insurance company.
Yes.
And the only thing that they asked, there was no branding specifically within the episodes, the only thing they had is that on Hulu, the only advertisements that played during the commercial breaks were this investment or this insurance company. Like, that was the, it looked normal. It looked like the insurance company was just had ads, but they were actually very specifically tied to this show. So that does exist. I don't see that as necessarily the future of where it's going, because that is in the same way that I wouldn't say that soap operas were the future of media.
But there's still a viable model.
That's true.
Yeah, so, yes.
So on the topic of intellectual property and specifically to the creator distributed transport model, where you're encouraging sort of fan interaction and rehashing mashups and all that type of thing, what type of safeties are in place to protect you from some big manufacturing company, for example, to say, oh, cool, it's Creative Commons will take your characters, make action figures, and so.
Well, very specifically, it's Creative Commons non-commercial license. So as long as you're doing it for fun, you want to make a T-shirt to wear to a con, you want to do your own fan spin-off episode, that's great. But the moment you try to sell that, then we can say, sorry, no. Which actually is something we haven't had to do, but if someone wants to make t-shirts for the show, then we say, great, this is the percentage that we'll take, which is very low, go for it. Because it's just like with the fan-made media, which we've seen, posters and memes. One guy animated the first 3 minutes of the very first episode, which made it funnier than actually what I directed, so been ambivalent about that, but no, it's amazing. But it brings new people to the material, brings it back, and these are, again, new people watching the show who don't necessarily become contributors, but enough of a percentage of them do, which is why we, again, are releasing everything for free. It's not everyone has to contribute, as long as they share it with people. They say, this is something that I like, someone might, and those numbers have borne out.
I mean, I think what you just described is in essence the theory behind patent law, like behind patents. The idea that a company invests, they have their 20 years to use that technology, and then it's open to the world. I mean, unlike copyright, which is now how many years? I mean, yeah, something stupid. Thanks, Disney. And But patent laws is like that, where it's like, cool, you have a short period of time where it's your thing, and then in the grand scheme of things, it's now for the general good.
Yes. I was listening on NPR to an interview with Jonathan Colton about his business model, and he writes music primarily aimed at a geek audience, releases it under Creative Commons. People have created music videos that are on YouTube for his songs. He said one guy created karaoke versions of all of his songs and gave them back to him because he just wanted the karaoke versions for his own use. And then he sells the songs on his website, both individually and his albums. So I mean, you can go buy a song of his for $1, and he makes way more money than I thought he made. But I mean, trying to translate that into something else for a model, like say for a web series, or for a film, or for some kind of multimedia experience, since you're releasing it with Creative Commons, I'm specifically addressing you. But how do you monetize this? How do you make a living?
We do essentially the same things. We can sell digital downloads of the individual episodes or of the season as a whole. We sell DVDs. We sell related merchandise as well. The thing is, I mean, if you're a singular artist like Jonathan Colton, singer-songwriter, or you're a webcomic or web cartoonist, whatnot, or it's a small collection of people, the money that comes in is more than one person needs and is living very comfortably. Whereas if you're doing film, $100,000 for an individual, that's a great year. $100,000 for a film, we're cutting everything to fit that in, and we're scraping to get by. So while we're doing the same thing, it doesn't go as far because there are so many departments and so many, film is still the new opera. I mean, it's the culmination of everything.
And I think that goes back, I forgot who said it earlier, but making sure to scale what you're doing to what's appropriate. So if you want to make something online and you want to distribute it in that manner, and you want all these different things, going back to the script development and the concept development, going, cool, well, I'm going to be able to afford, if the goal is to make $150,000 a year, that'll be great for 1 or 2 people. Like that's, or whatever, that's the number you need to realize. Then cool, how can I make that work with that number of people? If you say, I want to make this cool web series and we're going to make $100,000 a year and we need 150 people on board, it doesn't make as much sense, and that's assuming no hard costs besides people. So it's about understanding what your potential and what your business plan is, and then understanding what they can support, and scaling it appropriately.
Right, and telling that story well, and in an interesting, compelling way. I mean, you're not on $150,000 a year going to be able to recreate World War II.
But I want to answer your question specifically. There are 3 main revenues that are brand new that will become bigger. The Android market, the iTunes store, and eventually the Microsoft store. All 3 own basically 100% of the tablet market, as well as the content and the delivery method to generate revenue from that content. So to answer your question, what are the new revenue streams? Those are the big 3 right now.
We can add Amazon too.
Amazon is Android. Amazon, Google, they're so close in what they have to do together. They're pretty much the same
Everyone mad
place.
that Amazon Studios and Xbox are creating their content, developing their content out of LA. That's where they do it.
Yes.
That kind of brings me to another thing. I think we mentioned earlier that there's so much content on the internet that it's impossible. The quality level across the board has gone down, and it's harder to sift through everything. Do you guys see like more curators coming forward? Are there examples of people and services, you know, like iTunes and Google and Amazon are trying to be these kind of large, huge portals that anything can come in? You assume there's a certain level of quality that's coming in, but it's almost like stepping into the netosphere. Are there like other people that are being like almost like personal DJs, and how do those like collectives maybe come together and make like a station of content that I want to see that I can trust, that is larger than just one production company? And you see
to answer your question, it sounds more like a museum curator, except a museum curator for the web or for YouTube. I can go to this person's channel and they've curated a playlist for me.
Well, I would answer that I think still currently the #1 YouTuber, I think, is it Zay Frank? That's basically what all his channel is he just goes on and finds funny videos and shares those funny videos and talks in between. Like that was kind of his shtick, and he's obviously branched out from that, but he became pretty much the #1 YouTuber in the world by finding funny videos and putting them in his videos.
And I want to, bounce off of that. When you talk about the end of like television as we know it, playlists, that is the future right there. Because anybody under, 25, it's just like, why am I buying a CD? Why am I buying a DVD? I just go to somebody's playlist and play it on demand.
Well, and people are doing that now, even with Netflix or Hulu Plus. For series that are on the air, I'm not watching them. I'm waiting until the series is done so I can sit down and marathon through the stuff because I can't wait. I don't want to wait a week.
Yes.
Or for example, like I didn't catch The Walking Dead when it was on the air because I had other things going on. I was able to power through the first season when it was on DVD. Awesome. I tried to get through the second season, interrupted a couple of times, and says, darn it, I missed it. I'm going to wait until the whole thing is done so I can playlist it all in one again.
Which is cool because that whole DVD kind of a mentality that it's like, I'm going to wait until the series is done to watch it. Like, in the same way, opens up the potential for some sort of epic film. Like if you said I want to make a 10-hour film, it's actually not as crazy as it might have sounded before because you don't need to play the movie theater in the same way. You could release it, and if you could have the right marketing and the right ways to pull people in, I'm going to sit down and watch 10 hours of a television series. I mean, a 10-hour film might actually benefit more because it doesn't have to be episodic in any way. So you get the 10 hours of content is pure storytelling without commercial breaks that had to make sense and specific cliffhangers every 20 minutes because that had to make sense. I mean, if Joss Whedon said, I want to make, I want to remake Firefly or do whatever with Firefly, and it's going to be a 10-hour movie, I'd watch it.
So getting back to your question though about the curation concept, you see that a lot on YouTube, and also you see it on microblog platforms like Tumblr. You've got tastemakers or influencers or whatever you want to call them in the networking terms. That's all they do is they curate stuff they like, and it's much like movie critics from 15, 20, 30 years ago, where if you had a movie critic that you knew you liked, you would listen to whatever they said. Oh, they like this movie? I'm going to go see it. And it's operating very much like that.
And like you said, you would target those people when you're making your content and know for sure that's where you want to be.
Actually, that was exactly what I was going to say. I mean, this is, and you see this happen all the time. I mean, literally, it's like I'll see something like on, like Boing Boing in the morning, a video will show up. Suddenly, like 2 hours later, you're seeing like 500 friends on Facebook are linking to that video, and then suddenly it ends up like on the stranger's website, and it's just this is sort of the at least one of the avenues that seems to be emerging in terms of how content is disseminated. Is that there are specific sites where people go to because they trust the people who are running those sites, whether it's an individual or a conglomeration of individuals, and these people are sort of are becoming, in a sense, sort of gatekeepers. It's like if you see something on their site, you know it's going to be good, you know it's going to be worth watching, and that sort of drives that particular content out into the rest of the sphere. The other one that I think that is another one which is like thoroughly addicting to me is a site called wimp.com, which is one where people just sort of randomly put stuff up, and the next thing you know, you just spent 2 hours going through and looking like at 35 or 40 videos, and of those you find like 5 that you really like, and you post them So there are definitely these sort of specific sites, and I'm sure there are more that, because it depends on what type of content you're interested in, who's doing what. But this seems to be at least one of the key ways that a lot of this gets out is just there are people out there who are just massive aggregators of content, and then they filter content that interests other people, and then it just goes from there.
So what's cool about what you said is, and you said they're becoming kind of gatekeepers, and unlike the gatekeepers of the past, they're gatekeepers in which they are hungry for content. They're gatekeepers who want more and want more.
Yes.
And not only that, the amount of energy it takes them to repost your video is so negligible. It's like copy, paste. Like a lot of times with the videos I've made that have gone super viral, like even on some of the most prominent blogs or even news sites that we get posted on, their article, they'd say, check out this new video. It's like, wow, great article. Great. I really appreciate the critique of our video and sharing the message. So they're just like, hey, this video is funny. Like, but they shared it, and it was on. We've hit pretty much every major news site. We've hit I've hit Boing Boing several times. We've been Gizmodo, Kotaku, like all the major blogs, all the major But then we get played on TV as well because of that. But then yeah, you have to know how to get those people's attention. And here's the secret. People ask me, well, how do you make such viral videos? Like, the videos like the iPhone one we made or the other ones we've done in the past. Like, how do you get hundreds of thousands or millions of views? Right when we release the video, we email everybody a personal message and say, hey, we heard you like this topic. So, it's like, hey, I heard that you like video games, or I heard you like fantasy. And
I like video games.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, you say, you wrote this article about this kind of fantasy comedy thing, check out my stuff. And it's not traditional PR where it's just like, here's our press release. It's like, tailor your message to that person as an individual and say, I thought you might like this. And don't even ask them for anything. Just say, I thought you might like this. And then if they like it, then they'll post it.
The job of the gatekeepers of the past was to say no. If you said yes to the wrong project, you got fired. The job of the gatekeepers of today is to say yes.
Yep.
So when you're saying when you put up a video, you have a list of people that you email?
Yeah. As soon as when we release our videos, the first thing we do is contact. But even while we're making the video, we come up with a press list, and press can mean anything. Press can mean a blogger in town, like press can mean a Twitter user that's influential. Like that's press to us now, and I think of PR. So as soon as we launch this video, we do that. And the other thing that people seem to get wrong about video online in the YouTube, like, well, I'll post my video on YouTube, it'll get attention, people watch it. It's like, well, what else did you do besides posting it? Like, I posted on YouTube.
Well, my question specifically was, that list itself is a curation.
Yeah.
So what are you doing to create that list? How are you?
I just said it. What is the story you're telling? Whether it's a funny video or a serious video or anything like this, is it political video? Is it whatever you're making? Who else is interested in that? And why? Historically, this is going back to their track records. When did they post this stuff? You say Boing Boing. Boing Boing is way into security. They're way into privacy issues. And our joke among our friends is we're never going to hit Boing Boing unless it's a video specifically about privacy or security issues. Like you got to know. Gizmodo likes fake products, stuff like that. So like our iPhone video, that's how we were able to go. Well, Gizmodo's going to love this because they like fake products. Like knowing all those people and using social media and following people on Twitter and saying, oh, this person loves a good romantic comedy. I mean, so applying it to more generic, more general storytelling terms, like what is someone's favorite taste? Does this actor, does this famous person love Joss Whedon? Well, our thing's kind of like Joss Whedon's style of storytelling. Like it's that kind of stuff.
So what you're saying is build the network for yourself and actually interact with them and understand your network.
Yeah.
And then use them as you choose, but don't do it willy-nilly. Do it in a targeted focus.
You need to understand,
honest way.
You need to put yourself in their shoes and go, if I was this person who is running a successful blog, Twitter account, anything, why would I post this video? And if it's like, well, it's a great story, told well, with good production quality, and I happen to have a thing for cats, whatever. It's like, someone, if you know that about someone, you can then share it with them specifically. And if that person says, man, if anyone ever shares with me this kind of video, I'm gonna love it. Like, send it to them. That is the person to send it to.
So I'm going to totally change topics now because we actually had one that hasn't been hit at all, which is the development of youth with transmedia. So the worker of the 21st century, where do young people fit into this model?
I have a crazy idea.
Yes.
I've been thinking a lot about this. I have an issue with film schools and the way that they're currently structured to address this. They're great at making films, but they're not great at making new crazy ideas. They're about training people to play the roles that are traditionally done in the traditional film industry. And almost going, not backwards in the sense of going back, but going back to the times of apprenticeship. And this is something that was talked about in the opening, I think, is sharing what you're learning with youth. And having and taking time to do that is really important, because these aren't the kind of things that right now make sense in traditional school formats in a lot of ways. So I mean, they're doing it. You know, youth are online. They're making their own videos, or they're doing their own things. And you know, honestly, it needs to be a two-way street, because it's not going to be the apprenticeships of olden days where I'm a blacksmith and I'm teaching you everything. My word is, you know, law. It's going to be you having a question and answer and going back and forth, because they're going to have concepts and ideas about new ways of doing things that aren't going to make any sense to you. You know, how many people in this room totally understand Twitter? You know, how many people in this room don't get Twitter? Like, when Twitter first came out, everyone's like, this is dumb. Like, what? Why do you want to use this? And now it's one of the most prominent, you know, social media networking kind of tools in the world. And people didn't get it, but kids got it first. Or I guess, yeah, it was the kids, and then like marketing professionals in their 30s and 40s, and it grew out from there. But it's going to be not only mentoring. It's mentoring on the technical and the logistical things. Because as a 12-year-old kid, they're not going to know how to actually produce a zombie, or 8-year-old kid, they're not going to actually know how to produce a zombie film, but they might have the idea about doing something different that no one thought of before that would work. So understanding that, as, you know, while wisdom, age, or, you know, with age comes wisdom, there's also something new happening with how fast technology is changing the world, that you need to listen to that 12-year-old who goes, that sounds dumb because we text each other and do all this. You know, it's like, you know, use your phone to call someone. Phone to make, what's a call? You know, it's like, it's that kind of thing where things are changing very rapidly, and making sure you're listening to them.
Any other thoughts from you guys?
I just stuff that would qualify what Forrest has already said. Like, an example of that being, we work with a production team, a trio called El Good Times Productions, that are about 10 years younger than we are, and does incredible work, and all out of cardboard and miniatures and stuff that they do in their living room. Like, they just did this clip from the Empire Strikes Back uncut, the bit where it's basically they export 15 seconds of the movie at a time, that different people recreate frame for frame to make a fan version of the movie. Their version was incredible, with you know, painted, textured stormtrooper armor, all out of cardboard. These guys are doing. I mean, looking at that, first meeting them, I said, okay, everything that you're doing is wrong, but it's brilliant. So I mean, it's that sort of nugget of creativity. They learn to do it on their own that would normally have been crushed by a film school, or that I experienced when I went down there. It's like, here's the stuff that I did on my own, guerrilla style, that's so far has led to some success. They say, great, let's undo everything that you've learned and rebuild it again. But to take, again, what has arisen organically that makes them unique and gives them that vision and that look and that style that is unmatched, that they developed on their own, and fitting it into something that is constantly changing. Because, again, 5 years from now, they're going to be the veterans who are taking new kids under their wing and saying, let's figure out how to adapt you. So, basically, I'm saying I'm already obsolete.
You said that that's a great point about how quickly things are changing, and how, yes, it's important to have that kind of breaking down and rebuilding in things like the military, which are extremely structured and know how things work. But in this realm that we're in, is so free form that you really have to let things happen organically. And that's exactly the opposite of what traditional film schools do.
But, you know, there's another point about youth here too, that's, I don't know what technology is going to look like a year from now. I don't know what magical device is going to come out in 2 years that's going to change everything again. You know, the youth culture right now continues to adopt and keeps pushing the corporations forward. And it's that amount of like getting that piece of that money to say, look, we need to not just do what we've done before, but we keep moving forward and keep experimenting. And that's, you know, that's the great push right there.
Nice. Well, and with that, we're actually past time. So we have to stop now, but thank you, everyone, and thank you, gentlemen. This was awesome.
Thank you.
And we will reconvene back in here with everybody for our recaps.